This is an art piece that DJ did, my son. Calling out, oh God. There were a lot of unanswered questions that he had in his own head. DJ was my oldest son. Because of his mental health challenges, put himself in a situation where he was gunned down violently in West Louisville. I know we're in a crisis, and I'm just like, want to answer the call. Murder rate is at an all-time high. High rates of domestic violence. High rates of suicide with elementary age black males. I can't breathe. I think the violence is a reaction to what we're experiencing right now. Don't shoot. It's like a powder keg. You take an oppressed people who not only have a 400-year history of oppression, and you couple that with the disparate impact of COVID-19, economic oppression, disrespect, is the relentless, pervasive, not ever-ending adversity that we experience by being black in Louisville, Kentucky. And I think that's why black minds have to matter. When I ask my barber, how you doing? He says, I'm doing great. How are you doing? And just to be able to have that kind of contact is worth $20 a week for me. It's actually worth more. Why is it that black men don't like going to the doctor?
You don't want nobody to know that you got a problem.
I never knew that I had high blood pressure. When I found out, they put me in an ambulance and rushed me to the hospital because I was on stroke level.
Woo. If you've got depression or other mental illness, it don't mean you're weak. It just means that you've got an injury that needs to be addressed just like any other injury. So this project, DJ's plan, is to address issues so parents like myself won't have to experience the pain about raising awareness of mental health amongst our young black men and the importance of it.
And if you can reach out and just touch a life or two, it makes a difference because then that life might touch someone.
I told you it was a mess.
Part of that is coming in barbershops like this.
And it's hard to talk to someone who hasn't been in your situation, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. One of the main supports to overcome trauma is supports. We really want community engagement, community conversation about this issue. That's very important.
The stigma is men are normally provide. They don't have time to go cater to themselves. You kind of tend to just naturally put yourself on the back burner.
Having community conversations in barbershops.
So these are the things that we'll start discussing this morning.
2 barbers here have been trained in mental health first aid.
He feels like we're on the front line as far as dealing with individuals with the mental health issues, and we are.
Learning how to help someone who is showing warning signs.
Not just recognizing it, but giving them the resources to do something.
And it's scary to think that people are really suffering.
People get in your chair and you don't know them from Man on the Moon and they just start talking. I feel like that's a good thing on my part because they feel comfortable around me and then I could help.
Our therapists are not only trauma informed, but they are culturally responsive in that they are teaching individuals how to take those experiences and see it not as a deficit, but as a strength, and how to build their resiliency.
Here's a piece of paper. So they can better recognize, better be able to respond, and be able to refer if necessary, if they see someone that's in a crisis that needs the help. The impact that violence has had on our community, on all of us in here, we know somebody who has probably died from a violent death. So how does that impact us? What do we do with that?
I can come in heavy, laden, burdened, feeling terrible, but when I leave, I've been able to leave a lot of that in the chair.
And I just think this is so important. It's time that we have this conversation, help save our young black men. Much needed.
I get fed there until I come back the next time. That's why I feel like COVID was so detrimental in that way, because when those places shut down almost with no notice, and then we lost it. You didn't get there every 2 weeks, fill up.
Can't go to church, can't gather in parks, community centers. So where are black men going to have these conversations?
For individuals who already are disenfranchised or marginalized in any way, this is a greater impact.
Our adult populations have been suffering, but we have to also remember our children are most vulnerable.
Along with all the other things we've seen in terms of the schools being closed, recreation centers being closed, we have seen an uptick in youth violence, in particular in our city. They too experienced a lot of trauma and unrest and anxiety and depression of not knowing about the future. What does this mean for us that we can't go to school and we can't, we won't be able to have a formal graduation and all the things that they had planned.
So make sure you check that link out in our bio.
So how do we help to elevate that voice so that they're engaged in the process of their own healing?
I'm really excited for this.
If we're really focusing and thinking about our future, it has to be a future with youth investment.
And we have to pay attention and give them some attention as it relates to mental health issues as well.
We're having a Black Minds Matter event.
97.3.
Focus on high school kids.
Get our hands wrapped around our kids to let them know that they have some mentors in us.
Good morning. Good morning. There has been an awakening of what's happening to the mental health of our community.
I respect you. You are important. You have value. I think they're ready for that. They want that, and that's why they're willing to wear their mask, get their temps taken. And
our kids are up against things that a lot of other populations can't even comprehend. Some of our kids even have symptoms of post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Anybody know anybody in the last this summer that has been part of that killing that's been going on? Anybody know anybody this summer? Just this summer alone. So we got a lot on our minds.
None of us can control what it is that happens to us, but we all have the power over how we respond to it.
Frustrated.
me too. Right here. All right, there you go. So I think that they felt heard when maybe they didn't feel like before. I can even talk about what's going on with me and the things that are bothering me, because people are literally losing their lives right now. They're losing so much. So what I have going on maybe doesn't seem like a lot.
All right, the next emotion is disappointed.
It created a space where they could talk about that and not feel any guilt or shame about what they were feeling. And then we were able to incorporate that with some mindfulness and meditation techniques to help them to be able to deal with emotions as they come moving forward.
I'm starting to see more young Black therapists focusing on addressing mental health conditions in the Black community. So the word is getting out. People are more aware. People are having these conversations. And there are more organizations that are intentionally and strategically really trying to address the issue. And I think that's a piece of the picture. But I think that's just scratches the surface. I think we got to go deeper and find out why are Black folk being pushed off the cliff mentally and physically in the first place. Right when I think the crisis in our community is at an all-time worst, we seem to find a new bottom. The hope is the level of resiliency that is a part of our community.
So that's in you, but sometimes I think it just needs to be awakened.
We have to embrace the strengths of our culture and use some of the mental health skills that many of our predecessors and our ancestors had and how they overcame. African Americans are an amazingly resilient people. I can look back at my grandmother. She was born during a time when the lynchings were at an all-time high, the height of Jim Crow law. She was there when the Tulsa massacre happened. Just imagine all the isms that she had to endure. But my grandmother always had hope, and she instilled that in us. She would say things like, trouble don't last always. And you can't go by what it looks like. You have to have faith and believe in something beyond what you can see. Holding on to that, in spite of what it looks like, in spite of what it feels like, in spite of, shaking your head and wondering how bad is it going to get. It gives you a sense of encouragement. But then the other part of that is, how do we gain the respect from our community, from authority, from our mayor, from our city council members, from the police? Equity is about respect. Do Black lives really matter? Well, if they matter, then let's be equitable in how we address socioeconomic conditions to make the playing field more level for all people. Why can't we have our communities where we have access to healthy foods, parks that are safe to exercise in, safe and quality housing conditions? Why can't our schools be quality education if Black lives really matter? If we can show respect to a population that is going through that level of trauma, the research supports that violence will be less likely to occur.
This subject is so important.
I'm getting calls from across the country where they're wanting to replicate some of the things that we've done.
We want to continue to work and get as many voices and opinions, from our community as possible.
We just need to educate the community, have conversations like this openly and honestly. We're still here. We're maintaining and we're surviving, and many of us are thriving in spite of.
I think that we have to be aggressive about how we reach our people.
We are chopping at the bit to get more barbers trained in mental health first aid, do more barbershop conversations about mental wellness, hopefully by this summer.
To expand the conversation beyond what we talked about today.
We got to get busy and do work for our community.
Thank you all again. Appreciate it. I think you ought to give yourselves a round of applause.